And on to part 7, the final part of this Dreamweaver tutorial. I'm on page 61. By the way, I may have gone a little quickly over the very end of part 6. That section, what might go wrong, please read through that carefully. And again, reach out for help if you have any questions or problems. And again, it's best if you can try to push through and finish the section where you're at before you, and then we can look at the whole thing together and know where you're supposed to be. So part 7, we're going to be, as explains, adapting the single column layout of the Bayside Beat to a 2-column design for bigger screens. It's almost like we've been working really on the small screen version first. The way you deliver a different layout to larger screens is by using a media query. So this is a new web technology that we haven't used yet. Relatively new. I mean, it's not that new anymore. So it's pretty commonly used. And the media queries test for certain conditions like screen size, and then only then activate certain chunks of CSS, for instance. And then if you move on to page 62, there is a screenshot of what your page should look like now. I do caution you that it's kind of been squished to fit on the page. Really, this is more realistic. Your page should look something like this. All right, this is what your page should look like now. You should have hover on this photo to change it to color. And then your menu should look like this when you use it. And if it's a narrower measure, then it won't go off the screen like that. Okay, so that's where you should be. So moving on to page 63, we're going to add a media query. So let's get into the program. Here we are. And there's a little explanation on the top about what media queries are for. You should certainly read that. We're going to drag the live view scrubber until the document window is approximately 700 pixels wide. About, again, it doesn't have to be exact. I'm looking at that number there, up there, 700. I'm going to make it exactly 700. I got pretty close. Close enough. And now we're going to add a media query by clicking on this icon right here. Oops, on the icon on the ruler. This is the explanation, but you're supposed to click over here. Okay, so it's giving us a media query. We don't want max width, we want min width. And this is a little diagram, by the way, in your on-paper handout, the PDF that will show you this. And we want the minimum width of 700 pixels. You kind of should have put that in by itself, sort of, but it doesn't matter. We didn't actually have to change the scrubber at all. Whoops, 700. PX is correct. And then we're not going to create a new style sheet. We want to make it in our existing style sheet, which is responsive, the CSS. And we will say, OK. So that should all be the same, and we'll say OK. So we have at 700 pixels, we have created the trigger, which is going to activate certain code. So the visual media query bar at the top of the document window now is a purple bar. Click this bar to make the document window exactly 700 pixels wide. Click it, and now it is exactly 700. Okay, good. CSS Designer. Let's go back to the CSS Designer. Some things will be a little bit different. We want to make sure we have all and responsive. Again, all is responsive. But if we look in here, in this section now, we actually now have an at media. This is where the media queries are. Before I closed this up because we didn't need the space. We didn't want to use it. We didn't want to waste that space. But now we actually have something there, right? Media query is now listed here. When you select it, the selector pane is empty. Well, yeah. There's no selectors for that media query. And you can see the illustration on the next page, on page 64, how that should look. We do want it selected now. All the selectors we create in parts 4 through 6 are listed here. If we select global, global is everything. That's all of our selectors. But if we select at media, the minimum width, then it's nothing is there yet, right? We could save our work these styles will only be applied to browsers, so on. The real value of visual media query bar becomes apparent when you're working with multiple media queries. We're only making one. In the real world, you probably would make different ones for different screen sizes. Okay, minimum ones, maximum ones, and so on. And you could click on the bar and it would size it to just that what you want it to. And I could give you, boy, there's a note there that says if you want to learn more about these features, email me for online documentation you can read. I have to remember where the heck I put that. In any case, let's move on to page 65. Style and navigation menu for a 2-column layout. By now, it's assumed that you know how to create style selectors and rules. The instructions will be kept relatively brief. Okay. Hopefully we can remember. Make sure the document window is at least 700 pixels wide. And if it's a little bit more, that's fine. But it is 700, that's fine right now. Click anywhere in the navigation trigger to link in live view to selected. Okay, sure. The CSS designer, make sure the all button is selected, all button, responsive, and we want the minimum width at media selected too. And we're going to make a menu link. So we got all, responsive, and the minimum width, selector, a plus, and we're going to do a menu link, hashtag menu link rule here. And if I move up, I could get menu link. I have to delete that little A off there, but I just want the menu link. Okay. In the layout selection department, the menu link trigger disappears. Oh yes, we want to do display property none. Okay, menu link. Oh, let's hit the enter. All right, and then we're in the layout. And we are in display. We're going to change that to none. And our menu link disappeared. Because, of course, on our wide site, we're not going to have that pull-down sliding menu thing. Instead, we want to have our normal horizontal navigation laid out. Drag the live view scroller so we can see how this will change, right? There, boom, it comes in, there it goes out. See the difference? That's what the none does. And so make sure the media query is still selected and create a selector for nav links. Okay, sure. So we still have it's still the media query. That's where our styles are being put in. Make a selector. This time I'm just going to type it in. We could have tried to put our cursor someplace, but might as well just type it in. Nav and just chase. You gotta spell it right though. Nav links. Okay, good. And set the following properties and values. Maximum width, enter again. Max width, 1,000 pixels. Okay, max width 1,000 pixels. And position static. That would be in the absolute, in the positioning area here. Static, you can read about static, what that's going to do. Background color, transparent. Oops, transparent. Okay. Changing the position to static means that the unordered list of navigation links is no longer absolutely positioned, and it's displayed in its normal position. That should be what should happen. We'll see if something went wrong. Forcing the rest of the page content to drop down. You can't see the links yet because the collapsed class has been applied dynamically by the JavaScript menu. Yes, okay. Okay, so we're not seeing it quite properly yet because the JavaScript is still affecting it. So we have to kind of act on that. And we're down on the bottom of 65 on step 7. Again, making sure the media query is selected and the selector pane is empty, except for the ones we already just created. Yes, okay. Create a selector for nav links collapse. So we're going to handle nav links collapse differently here this time, right? So we are going to go to a plus. And again, I'm just going to type it in. Navlinks dot. I could select it. It's giving me that choice there, right? Hit the enter. So navlinks collapsed. And we're going to set the opacity to 1. That's in layout. Opacity to 1. Okay, so that's going to bring that back to some degree. The menu reappears, but only this page link is visible because the background color was set to transparent in the previous step. White links on a white background aren't possible to see. Okay, so we're kind of like adjusting to changes we made earlier. I'm going to fix these links by creating, again, in the media query, navlinks A. Okay, good. Another one, navlinks. A. Yep. And we're going to do some properties there now. Oh, hit enter again. And we're going to layout first, and width is 20%. Margin bottom, sure. I'm going to do it like this. It's going to be 20 pixels. Padding top and bottom will be 15 pixels. And padding bottom, this weird little box. Okay, 15, 15. And then float left. That's the first icon for this property. That should be in layout, float left. Okay, and then color, finally, text, color. Let's give that stuff some color. It's the old 1Es. Okay, and they finally have come back because they're no longer white on a transparent background. All right, so let's go ahead and save this work. And we can see it seems to be working here, but we might as well just be sure. Go to Files and run that. So we have our links now, and they seem to be working. That's very nice as it's wide, but of course when it gets narrower, we have this menu and it's working now too. So we go from a 1-column layout to a, there's a little problem here. This is supposed to be a 2-column layout, right? But that's okay. We have more things to do here. Do look through the explanation in the middle of page 66, where it describes why we use that 20% and why that works. How the float property is an old-fashioned way of doing it. We could use Flexbox to do this, and that's perhaps be a little bit more modern way of doing it. In fact, you can add that in if you wish. And then we're going to do absolute positioning to put the text over an image. Okay, so on page 66, use absolute positioning to place text over an image. Please read that first paragraph, which gives us an explanation. We are in, as it suggests, in index, right? And we can click on the purple bar to make sure our page is set to 700, and it is. There's a note here that if the ruler seems incorrect, you should close and reopen the page. That's fine. There may be some glitch sometimes with Dreamweaver in this process, but mine seems fine. In live view, select the paragraph under the image of the Golden Gate Bridge. So there's this paragraph here. Oops, come on back. There it goes. That paragraph there. All right. And now we're going to go back to our CSS designer. We want to make sure it's on all, on responsive, and we want our app media selected. And now we're going to make a plus. We're going to make a hero P rule. So I actually have that here. Otherwise, I could just type it in. That would be fine too. If that didn't work out. Hero P, and we're going to do a width. So that's going to start in layout with a width of 36%. Oops, come on. Oops. 36. My continued problems with some of these little boxes, try to type things in. Padding, top, left, right. Okay, so no bottom. Going down to padding, we're going to set top. Padding top of 20px. Padding left of 25, and then right is 25. And right is 25. And position is absolute. Okay, so going down to position, and we're going to make it absolute. Come on, absolute. All right, which takes it out of the flow. Okay, and then in step 4, there's a little discussion about what happens when you set the property to absolute. Absolute position removes it from the flow, yes. And number 5, using the visual tool immediately below the position property to move the paragraph info over the Golden Gate Bridge by setting a positive value for offset moves. So top 90 and right 33. Let's try that. Position top. And this is going to be in pixels. 90 and right 33. So it has it moving down from the top, over from the right, or to the right. Yeah, from the right. Set the color property to white and the border on all sides to 5 pixels wide and solid. Okay, so color is going to be under text, and maybe I'll just use the word white here. Whoa. Or FFF, hashtag FFF. And border on all sides. So border, we haven't used very much, and we will use the overall border for all the sides. All right. And 5 pixel solid is what we want. We don't want a radius. We want a width of, in pixels, of 5 and a style of solid. Okay. All right. Color white, 5 pixel solid. Paragraph should now be positioned over the Golden Gate Bridge, but it may not look quite like this. Yes, it doesn't look quite like this. But let's save it and actually look at a browser to see what it does look like, okay? Save all related files. Go back to Files, right-click on Index, open in Browser, Google Chrome. Yeah, it's kind of like is depending on the browser width for where that is ending up, and that should tell you something too about where we're headed with this. Okay. Most people's initial reaction to their absolute positioning item is moved. It hasn't. The offsets are from the top and right are exactly the same. Problem is that the offsets are calculated from the positioned elements containing block. That's the problem. It's nested inside the hero div. Is that the containing block? No, it is not. We have to tell the hero div to be the containing block. And this is the whole containing block issue, which you had an extra credit you could have done on before when we were talking about absolute positioning and floating and stuff. The 36% is relative to the page rather than the hero div. Offsets are calculated from the top and right of the page. Fixing the problem is remarkably easy. Create a new selector for the hero, plain old hero, still in that media query, set its position to relative. So here we go. In Designer, we're going to make a new selector, and it's just going to be for plain old hero. In this case, hit the Enter key twice, and we're going to go again to Layout, to Absolute Positioning, and make this position relative. Oops, did it work? Yeah, I got relative. Yeah, good. Yes, relative. Okay. This makes the parent div the containing block absolute positioning paragraph, and the offsets are no longer calculated from the top and right of the page. Full width in a browser, the text should now look something like this on the next page. Hopefully I got this right. Let's see. We're going to save all related files, and go back again and back into this and open in browser, Chrome, and there it is. As it's displayed on the page on the top of 69. Setting the elements position properly to relative allows it to be offset against the normal position of the page. Yeah, so we have now successfully chosen a containing block, which is that div, which is mostly the photo, and that's going to work out well now, as opposed to with the whole page. So it's being positioned relative to this point here, as opposed to this point up here. All right, so please read those couple of paragraphs on 69 underneath the photograph, and then we're moving down into the float one column alongside another. Again, we're using floats here, and we could be using Flexbox. I should probably rewrite this in the future for Flexbox, although there's nothing wrong with floating. It works. It's actually probably a little bit harder. Earlier, used the float property to make navigation links. We're going to make floating to create a two-column layout. When an element is floated left or right, it moves to that side, allowing following elements to move up alongside the vacated space. And for that, we have to do a clear. There's two newer methods we could use, as is mentioned here, Flexbox or the grid system. I would use Flexbox since it's just a couple of items and not trying to do the structural layout of a whole page. Again, let's get back to the program. And again, we've got the CSS designer, and again, it's on responsive, and then we got the app media statement here, the minimum width selected. So we'll continue from there. We need to create a selector for main and set its width to 60 degrees. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to go and do it as opposed to trying to find it, make it do it automatically itself. It's just the word main. It's not hashtag main, remember, it's just main, because that is actually the name. Where you look down here, you'll see it's actually called main, which is HTML5 element, which means like the main chunk of text or main display area. So we have the main column, main, and we're going to set the width property to 60%. So that'd be layout width 60%. 60. Okay. So we've got 60% on the main. All right. Create a selector for aside and set its width to 28%. Sure, why not? Selector aside. 2 enters for that. Width %. Click in there, and it wanted it to be 28%. 2%, so I don't need that. Hit enter for that. Okay, good. Also set the, and by the way, we could open this up here if you wanted to start to see the effect of some of this stuff here. Things are getting narrower here. Okay, good. All right. Also set the left margin to 0. Left margin to 0. This is necessary to override the 4% margin that inherits from the global style. So we have to change the margin. That's going to just change for this page width, though, right? So that is going to be a left margin to 0. Again, on the aside. Margin left to 0, and that's good. Put enter on that. All right. And the main element inherits a 4% margin on both sides, and the aside element still has 4% margin on the right. So combine the two elements, their horizontal margin adds up to exactly 100%, because we had that 65, was it? So 60 and 28, then we get the 4 and the 4. go ahead and another 4 too. So that's all going to add up that way. Good. Still in the media query, create a group selector for main and aside. Why not? Here we are, still in all that same stuff, plus main, comma, aside, 2 enters, and we're going to make margin top, margin bottom, float, and font size. You can see those numbers on page 70. "30 pixels, margin top. Same for margin bottom. Float left. Here's the float left. It's that little icon right there. They both are floating, and font size is going to change to be a little bit less than 1. Text. Font size. It's going to be EMs. It's going to disappear, but then I'll click back in it. It's going to be 0.875. Is that right? Yes. EMs. Good. Okay. As soon as you set the float property, it looks as though a disaster is struck because most of the background. Oh, let's see what has happened. Has disaster struck? Let's look at the live view. Oh my gosh, what's going on here? Well, actually, things have gone pretty well. We've got one text here, but what's flown up here is obviously the footer. Can you guess what we have to do about that? What happens when things have floated, but now you want something else not to float, right? Perfectly normal. What's happened is the footer has gone up into the float. The fix is easy. Still in the media query. Make a selector for the footer. Okay. We're still in responsive. It's still in the medium query. It's footer, not hashtag footer, because it's a regular HTML5 element, not an ID. So we're dealing with a footer now, and we're going to tell it to be what? Clear left. That would be under layout. And we're clear, and that is clear left. Boom. That stuff all goes back to where it's supposed to be now, right? So clear left, and then we're going to make a selector for the footer, clear left. I guess we did that. Now we have to set the viewport meta tag. The responsive design is complete. It's just one final step before your masterpiece can be displayed correctly on mobile devices. Okay. This is something we would have trouble demonstrating here on a desktop like this, but mobile devices need to have the viewport tag attached. So we are in the, we're going to go to an insert. But this time we're going to be insert viewport, I believe. Let's see, HTML category, insert panel, select viewport, there we are. It's the third section, roughly 2/3 of the way down. We can't be editing the CSS file when we do this. We need to be in the HTML source code. That's a little extra note from me there. We would do this, in real project, we do this with any responsive pages, although we only are dealing with one page here, right? Viewport meta, most mobile phones automatically scale pages. Without them, they would scale the page to ignore the media query. So we want them to use the media query, right? So they get the stuff the right way. So we are going to go ahead and do that, and it's going to apply to the head. So let's go ahead and go to the source code. Actually, split. We are in the source, right? Yeah. So we're just going to go to. Sorry for a little pause there. Okay. We're going to the insert panel. We are in the HTML area. We're going to scroll down 1 section, 2 sections, 3 sections, and we're going to do viewport. So what did that do? It actually did a meta viewport, which is enough for it to work properly on mobile devices, as is explained in the text here. We are really just about done, unless there's some problems. Let's take a look, shall we? Let's file, save all related files. And let's go to files again, and let's go ahead and look at this again in a browser. Open in browser, Chrome. Okay, So I see we've got clickable links and they are styled properly. They'll look very nice. That's working. We have a nice 2-column layout here on a wide screen. Oh, I see we do have a problem. Look at this. You see our navigation here is not clickable. Just a moment and we'll find a fix for this. So let's just take a look at things narrower and see if we have a problem at that point too. Narrow width, the menu is working nicely and they're clickable there. This is converted to a 1-column display and all the links and everything are still working here. All right, so let's take a look back at your instructions and take a look at some troubleshooting that we'll have to do here. Okay, if you are looking at the last page of the instructions, you'll see that this error has actually been predicted, kind of. And frankly, it won't happen to everyone, so that's why it isn't part of the normal instructions. There is some odd interplay which has to do with the order of the divs and how they are working or layered on top of one another. And what we essentially have is an area where the navigation area is being hidden by other things. Well, we could try to make Z-index make it work, but there's a better and surer fix for this. As you say, it's explained here under menu problems. And this also gives us an opportunity to go look at the code. I better file save all first. Look at the responsive. Look at our CSS, and scroll down. And let's make it the whole code view all the way through, right? So we have our CSS. Here it goes. It goes on down, and they get to see what does the app media statement look like and how does it appear. And here it is. See, it says app media, and then min describes it in parentheses, and then it has one curly bracket. You might say, well, where's the other curly bracket? It's like this entire chunk of stuff is within a set of curly brackets. So we have all these extra rules we made, which only apply at greater than 700 pixels, with a minimum width of 700 pixels. All of them are controlled by this area here, which is actually that curly bracket there connecting with this one down here. So this is not a stray extra problem down here. That actually is part of that. So this is also what we're going to do is also going to be for the widescreen. So we're going to apply it here. And it does have to do with kind of like the way we have these interactions between that narrow width menu and then this wider one here. All we have to do is do header, which is the area where that is, right? And say overflow. Oops, shoot. Header. Overflow. Hidden. And don't forget the semicolon at the end. So I'm going to save that now. And let's go ahead and well, I might as well just go up here and go ahead and look at it. Here's our wide page again, but look, now the links are working and active. Looks very nice, and at narrow width, it still works properly. Looks very nice. Okay. That is the end of the exercise. However, do pay attention in the handout. It says in the last few lines, for the final exam, here's a few things I may ask you about this. And of course, these are added on to all the normal final exam questions, which would be drawn from the quizzes. So this is stuff that's happened now since what was the final quiz. And those questions are, what is Dreamweaver site definition and what advantages does it offer? It's the way we keep track, Dreamweaver keeps tracks of files and folders and links and so on, right? And that's when we do new site to connect the folder systems and the files so it keeps track of them all. Why did you have to make a position relative rule for the hero div before you could properly position the text on the photo? There's an explanation in our tutorial about this. So I'll let you figure that out. Remember, it had to do with positioning and containing blocks. What does Z-index do? Right? Remember about layering? What does a media query do? We've used one here. In many modern pages, you may have several at different widths. And what can you do with a CSS filter? We did a filter, and we did a transition too, for that matter, which is moving into some newer parts of CSS. Hope you, I will say, enjoyed, learned something from this tutorial, and became a little familiar with the program at the same time. So that's the end. Again, if you're having problems, please let me know and we'll go over it. I'll probably have you just send me your zip folder and I'll look through it, and then we can talk about the fixes you need to make. If nothing else, when you get it all set, of course, zip it all up and submit it.